to segue into the misconceptions talking about
Okay.
business, because I think this is an important conversation. We both actually had agreed
Mm-hmm.
ahead of time. This is definitely a topic worth diving into.
Mm-hmm.
So let me start with some of those misconceptions, and one of them that we talked about before is this idea. It really seems like a lot of this comes back to expectations. So
Yeah.
it's this idea that if you do what you love, you won't have to work, and it's almost this kind of if you just believe it, it'll happen. Like build it and it'll come. What is your take on that sentiment?
Well, I do agree with do what you love, first of all,
Okay.
because you have a passion and a great interest. You're compelled to do something. If you're working, however, in a space of where you're offering a service, and coaches, consultants, trainers, unless they're employed by the organization, that's one thing, because that's their throughput of business. It comes through the organization. There might be to be an internal coach or consultant. You are going to be okay without the workflow. But if you're creating your own workflow of clients, first of all, there's how do they find you? How many can you really sustain every day? What's the price point? Now, all of this, we're now looking at the business and specifically being an entrepreneur or a solopreneur. To do that, you're learning two things. You're learning your trade, whatever that is, and then you need to learn how to run a business. Some people might come fully formed. They've already run several businesses. This is just another one. And they'll apply all that expertise to the business. It doesn't necessarily mean they're their best at what they do, but they're very good at marketing and presenting themselves and creating content and all that kind of thing. So I think it's really are you doing this for love? Keep it for love. Keep it as a hobby. Keep the other, I'm thinking about somebody in particular in England has a very, let's say, a job which they can sustain and do something in the therapy world as well. Or you're going to take a leap, because if you don't find out, you'll never know. You take this big leap, but then there's a desperation attached to it. I have to make this work. I have to find 5 clients. Why can't I convert? And every single meeting might come as a chance to convert someone to, have you heard about this? You should do it. And people go, yeah, that's a bit too heavy for me. That's a bit too intense for me. So it's this balance. And I think if you're working as a coach or you're working in the field that of service, it's a business, and it's not just the craft itself. So I'm thinking about the world for acupuncture, homeopathy, any kind of, let's say, alternative therapy.
Yeah.
And even in the coaching
Service-based
world, yeah,
business.
service
Yeah.
based, because I've worked in those fields too. And if you're working as a coach, you're still running a business.
Yeah.
So that's as important as the thing you do. What kind of business does this look like? What's your partnerships? Where's your throughput of clients? More importantly, Riley, how much do you need to live well? Where is that? For some people, it's very, very high. For some people, they can survive on a minimum. It doesn't matter which model you're operating in, but know your model.
That it's almost a different flavor of expectation. Um,
Mm,
it's always struck me as very important. Admittedly, I haven't figured out a way to get people it seems like an unsexy topic, or even if I didn't say that, I would say it's um, it seems boring. It seems almost like, or even taboo. People don't want to talk about the realistic nature of finances and being able to support yourself, and what's the revenue and what's your profit and how much are you paying yourself. But all those business things eventually tie to, well, what do you want your life to look like? I think that this, this idea, it almost seems, in my experience, I almost get the sense that people feel closed off when you think about, well, what is your baseline? How much money are you spending in a given month or a given year? And what do you need to actually survive on? And it seems like when people are asked or confronted with that question, it pushes all sorts of buttons. And yet, as you just described, it's a really great piece of information to have, to be able to Just like when we were talking about uh, previously with health and wellness, and it's that what are your values? What's your self knowledge? You have to have some direction.
So we go back to the same thing in business as we did through our earlier conversation, which is the things I value. Now, one of my values, Riley, is freedom. That is probably the top thing, freedom.
What does freedom mean to you?
Freedom means to me the agency to choose. The agency to choose. And it's also a felt sensation. It's a felt sensation of I'm free. That's for all my life. I've had that sensation. I want to be free. Sometimes it's turned up as escape, by the way, because there's an element to that. And there's a system I use, and I looked and I thought, that's me. So freedom, family, that's very important to me, well-being, and adventure. With adventure, which is anchored in not too crazy that I'm going to explode everything in my life, but enough to see things differently. Okay, to have life as an adventure.
Almost sounds like self-development or self-challenge.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's my book. So the plan is, well, what does the life look like? Who else? Are you married? Are you single? Blah, blah, blah. And if travel, like here I'm talking to you in Arizona, based in New York. I love the internet. It allows me to have this conversation with you wherever. But you need to be prepared. I bought my portable mic, whatever. So in the life we're designing, which is led by your values, what is it you wish to explore, learn, achieve, all of those things. And money is one on the 4 pillars. When I look at the whole thing, the first one is your well-being, because with that comes everything, and your self-knowledge. The second one is your relationships. So the context of the people around you, your career, whatever that is. And then prosperity and finance is going to be very important. However, does that mean on £20,000, or very difficult if I think about modern Britain, but let's say £40,000, I can live well because I have created, let's say, conditions in my life to be able to thrive. I haven't used the word survive, do very well. I've decided to do this. I've decided to live in a small space. Can you see the phenomenon in America of the tiny house, of the mobile home? People are already on this bandwagon, aren't they? They're already there.
Yes.
They're already there. They're saying, actually, what I want is more time. What I want is more freedom. What I want is the ability to go where I want to go. And they're prepared to make sacrifices, if that's the right word, to live that kind of life, which means that, yes, they need income, but they're not more as the barometer of their success. It's the right amount to be able to live that life. And then there's the other thing, how to sustain it. And we could talk about that maybe in another point. But the first thing is, well, what is it you really want? Is it massive profits? But so therefore you need to be static, and that's your main goal. And it is, and it's not about right or wrong. It's about what is it you want, really. And what are you prepared to work for? What are you prepared to sacrifice to? What are you prepared to give up?
Let me dig into that last point, because my business partner and I, we support coaches and consultants, the service-based businesses. As we've talked about, I've myself been a counselor, a coach, a consultant.
Yeah.
You've worn a lot of different hats. You understand that space very well. So we've come back to this. This is a topic that we're both very passionate about. And so we have a lot of conversations with a lot of different coaches and consultants who are looking into growing their business in some way, shape, or form. And whether it's streamlining it there's all sorts of different reasons. But at a certain point, we will talk about some of these kind of more tangible things. And I do not think I've ever met a person that said, I've met plenty that said, oh, money's not the most important thing. Totally get that. I think you just spoke to that. There's other pillars.
It's holistic. It's
holistic, yes. And yet, I've never met someone that said in these conversations that they actively are trying to make less money. Like most people are at least open to the idea, if it doesn't, even if it's with no extra work added, sure. And so let's just pretend, based on my experience, that we have the assumption that someone wants to have some level of growth in their business. And let's even just say that they've already figured out, there is some work involved in talking through, well, what is at least the starting point? But let's just assume that they have a figure in mind, um, whether it's a revenue mark or a profit mark or a whatever that deliverable looks like, that tangible, the benchmark. In terms of getting there, you talked about the sacrifice, and we talked in our previous conversation about um, the process of building a habit or breaking a habit. The misconception of 21 days, breaking addiction. You talked immensely about the breaking it down into a process. And you also talked about the time that it takes is the time that it takes. So I want to bring that piece up here when we talk about, well, what sacrifices do you have to make? Because ultimately, in order to make a change or a transformation, I think the assumption there that often gets forgotten is that there is a trade-off. You only have so many hours in the day. Where are you allocating those hours? So can you speak to the intersection between this is enough, I'm okay, I'm not, like, kind of a lot of people bury their head in the sands, and that's the build it and they will come kind of mentality, versus the other extreme. Talked a lot about black and white thinking of I always have to kill it, because I think that starts to push too. Now we're going, is that sustainable? So can we look at that intersection from your experience?
I think it comes into very much some of the things we were talking about earlier, and it's making time in the day for your business. So if you're a coach, obviously your business is talking to people, because that's what coaches do. They talk to people. Somebody said, oh, you get paid for chatting to people. I went, yeah, okay, I'll take that. But the second thing is how you curate your clients, how they find out about you, how you add value and offer value to them, how that maybe there's more than one way as a coach. There are many things you can do as a coach. You can create products, you can create courses, you can deliver courses, you can join a coaching organization. There are many ways to do this. And there's also your own practice. So having that almost like a portfolio of offerings is useful. And finding out which one you really, really feel that you're adding value to others, as well as yourself. Okay? As well as yourself. There's an alignment now. They're saying, this is of value. And I know that you see it because people want this, because you believe in it. And I think you believing it and knowing to value and valuing yourself. And there is that intersection between valuing what you do. I know many coaches, including myself at times, thinking, what exactly am I offering here? And I think it comes through, keep on asking the question. And most coaches, Riley, are very people oriented. That's why they do coaching. That's why they do therapy. They care about people. Yet it isn't enough. We also need to care about ourselves, and we need to care about our businesses. I know people saying, well, I'm working so hard, I just turn up for it all. And they do reach what we call exhaustion. Sometimes it's called burnout, because it's giving too much and not thinking, how else can I add that value, where it's just all on, I need to do this one thing. So it's looking at the coaching. This is a skill and it's a tool and a skill. It's a skill set that actually most people have, because it's listening and talking and asking the right questions and having knowledge to apply that. But it's also how else can that be offered to people? And maybe you might have to have another business as well. There might be something else. So it's how you create your portfolio if you're going to be self-employed, because you are self-employed now. And that's the big realization. You're not working for an organization. If you are an internal coach and you've got a job and you're also coaching them, then you're good. Okay, you've got it sorted out. Your portfolio is already good. But if you're independent, then there needs to be some real reflection about that service. And it will change, Riley, because I know, in the time I've been doing this, it's changed tremendously from where I started.
Yeah.
And you might come full circle back to where you belong, but you're kind of different. So it's staying alive too. I might need to change this up. And and look at what we're doing now. We're talking with technology. I've just been in a 3-day conference, and I can tell you, AI, the technology was the headline there. And we need to be aware of the impact of that too.
Yeah, you talked about earlier how to leverage emotions, and I think it was disappointment specifically in that example. But leveraging the tools, the technology, and again, it comes down to the awareness piece of just understanding and accepting the fact that I like how you said, as in our experiences, my partners and I, coaches are they're people. As you say, but you are also a person, and I think that's often forgotten.
Yes.
And I love that you include your business in there, and you can almost think of it as another like it also requires your time and attention. There's working in the business, there's working on yourself, but there's working on the business as well. So working in the business is actually delivering the service or coaching or whatever it is that you offer. But then on the business are those questions. And one thing you said struck a nerve for me, so I want to explore that one, which was the portfolio. And years ago, I was doing operations consulting, and I worked with someone who actually taught people this idea on how to build a portfolio career, is what she called it. And you'd have your different strings or strands of revenue, and that was very intentional. And it was for those, I forget the name off the top of my head, but the kind of people that rebel against the idea of just having a thing.
Yeah.
And, to each their own. In my experience, many, if not 100%, I'd say 95% of the clients that I've had, the coaches, consultants, founders, speakers, authors, that's the solopreneur space is what I've worked in for about the last decade or so. The vast majority of them are way more susceptible to shiny object syndrome, as opposed to the other end of the spectrum, which is being too hyper focused. I've never met someone in this space that was too focused, especially because, again, a lot of the skill sets that we have when we're talking about self-reflection, awareness, alignment, values, more often than not, I think that people at least are aware of they're aware of the direction that they're going. And I think what happens though is we either change direction or we start going in circles or chasing new shiny objects, and it becomes this hamster wheel where you just never seem to make the progress that you want. And so I'm really curious to ask you, because again, when it comes to that, the balance between the portfolio career, if I were to just put it in one hand, versus the other, this idea of something that I've learned in this space is called it's the idea of the 5 1s. And so it's having one ideal client avatar or profile, whatever you want to call it. It's having one offer, one thing that you're focused on that provides value. It's having one traffic source where you are finding those avatars, those potential leads. Having one conversion event, so something that turns that lead into a client. One system, one funnel, one process. You can break that down. And for 1 year. And so maintaining those things, giving it long enough for the seed to sprout as you lead.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm curious your take on, because again, without judgment here, I think there's, to each their own, there's different things that work and don't for different people. But what's your experience been in finding the balance, at least from your perspective of the focus versus the portfolio?
I love that model, by the way. And I have done events where I talk, events where I I talk at, I've done quite a few talks at conferences where people are interested in this information, being very specific about a particular industry. I think that portfolio approach is important. I think it's also being agile to the ones that really don't work. They're not working for you, and say, okay, this doesn't work for me, but there's something else. And it could be that all you want to do is have a specific amount of clients for a specific price and watching that build. So one of the things I did was I joined, and everywhere I go, I join a network that already exists. And when I was new to an area and a point in my life where I needed to reach out to people very different to myself, I joined in England, it's called the British Network. Is it Institute? Okay. BNI anyway. And that taught me so much about relationship building. I mean, it was very specific, it was very structured. You have to be 7 o'clock, you have to do this, but it was absolutely reciprocal. I made connections with so many people that I wouldn't normally have done. I came out of my own pond, if you like, of the healing, the trainings, and the coach, and I went into a very different one. And when I said something, they said, "I don't really know what you mean by that." I went, "Oh, I need to change my language. It's too of this moment. Speak a bit more plain English, and then we get it. Oh, so you can help us with that. All right, great. Well, we know how to refer someone. We know somebody just who needs your skill." So I think that's what I mean, remain agile. And I remember somebody said, "Why on earth are you turning up at 7 o'clock to go to that event?" I said, "Because I am learning so much that often when I speak, people don't understand me." Okay. So I need to convert that, and I pride myself on communication, but they're not understanding what I'm saying. Because I offer a very broad, it's very much about human behavior is what the thing is. But I'm realizing, that person, I was sent a lot of business thanks to that. But I also gave a lot of business. And that's the thing. That's the thing about reciprocity. You give and you receive. And there is a balance in that. So I would say to anybody who is growing a business, belong to a network, and not a network necessarily which is about your industry. Because you're going to find all people seeking the same kind of thing. And some people have been in a long time. They're very, very well maintained. Some people are just at the beginning. But if you go to a very different network and a different conference and you offer something very specific, you stand out just by being different.
We spend, I can't tell you how many hours talking about this exact conversation every single week with our clients. And so cheat code shortcut, I'll say, is in terms of the network, just for people listening, rather than your industry, make it about your avatar, the person that you want to help. That's the network that you want to tap into. And also, I have to look it up, but I think it's business networking. I think it's Institute. I think you had that right, because it's over here too. I remember, and it is usually early morning meetings. But anyway, people can look at that. But the network piece, I think that's, when I first launched the earlier version of the program, the accelerator program I'm running now, I actually called it Network and Sell. And the reason I called it that, I just want to highlight this point that you're making, is, well, number one, because those were the things we were doing, is I developed this process that we now call authentic outreach. And it has a lot to do with the reciprocity. It taps into an abundance mindset rather than a scarcity mindset. Giving first, giving value up front. And we had more time. I could dive deeper into each of those. But the thing I want to highlight here is that the reason that I myself called it that is because we were eating my own dog food and practicing what we preach, which is exactly what you're just describing, which is I used the language my audience, my ideal clients used to give them what they wanted. So I think a lot of times, are you familiar? Have you heard of the curse of knowledge before? Does that ring a bell?
No, that's a good one.
Oh,
The curse of knowledge.
So yeah, if anyone else listening, it's called Made to Stick is the book that I first heard about. I'm not sure where they got it from, but Chip and Dan Heath are the co-authors. They have lots of books. That's probably 15 years old at this point.
I've written it down, Riley. Is that good?
It's a good one, Made to Stick. And it talks a lot about, this a lot of different ideas, but this idea that an analogy I use with people all the time is I say if you've ever gone rock climbing, specifically like in a gym or something, you might be up climbing up on the wall and someone's usually belaying, like, tied to a rope so you don't fall. And, or if you fall, I should say.
Yeah.
And you get to a spot where you're stuck and you're like, I'm not sure what to do, where to go. And usually they're just yelling down below you, like, just move your left foot here or your right hand there. Like, it's so obvious. And it's not that they're any more skilled or experienced or even more knowledgeable than they just have a better perspective.
Yeah,
You're just too close to the problem. And if it's not a problem, sometimes you're too close to, you're too ingrained in
yes,
your modality, your training, your ways, you're almost too experienced. And so oftentimes in the research they found is that they called it the curse of knowledge. If it is easier for a novice to explain a topic than it is for an expert, and actually part of what makes an expert really, I shouldn't say expert, but a good teacher, is being able to explain it in a novice way.
yes. And for someone who is an expert, and I know we're not talking about the Enneagram, but I'm absolutely fascinated by that.
Yeah.
If you're a knowledge kind of,
what is it, by the way?
okay, the Enneagram, and I discovered it many years ago, and I did know my type. But in 2003, I decided to do a practitioner training. I did two. I did one in London and one in Texas. And this is that we come in with a preference, which is our motivation, our deep motivation in life. And remember, I said freedom is mine. And I actually came out as an SP7, which means self-protective 7. Sevens are the born entrepreneurs. They spin many plates. They are, and my particular flavor of 7 is into networking, which is other people. But actually in my 7 was also another number, which is 2. And that was very high. And that's because I actually do care about people. I do. Sometimes a bit too much. But that is why I actually chose this as a profession as opposed to other professions I could do in my life. What that gave me was almost a mirror in language, not like just my behavior, but also why I act that way. And also, it doesn't say you're just this one thing. You've got all these other numbers that stack, which explains why you might run to some opportunities and why you might pull away from others. So going through this process, and when I did it, I answered 30 questions. And what's interesting about the process that we learned was that it isn't every question comes from a body of questions. So let's say I answered a question, no, I don't do that. I wouldn't get the next questions on a static questionnaire. It would go into a pool of over 2,000 questions and pull up the next question to match, to really check if that is my number.
It's tailored for you.
It's tailored for you.
Yeah.
So every single one is slightly different. But when I read it, and it does say it's almost 95% accurate. And I've done many systems. Riley, I am not a person that hasn't done systems. I've done plenty, including the 5 elements, Myers-Briggs, all. But this one for me felt like a suit that fitted. It felt like it's not just off the cuff, and maybe it's like I happen to be a Taurian, but there's so many different kinds of Taurians in the world. I'm different to many other people I know. This one was very tailored to me. I went, this fits. And also what happened in my life. And I went, and I'm the sort of person, oh, that couldn't be true. That's not true for me. It was true for me. Something that happened to me. Because if freedom is my value, and I want to be limitless, sometimes you don't see where you just need to be in that plateau and maintain. And that came back to in my life because I was actually quite ill in 23, 24.
Can you
much better. Yeah, I had something called polymyalgia rheumatica. So if the listeners know that, they know you can't just push your way through that one. And I'm really at the tail end of that now. And I read my report in the Enneagram and I went, it's absolutely accurate because I can't outthink this. I can't reframe it. I need to sit with it. I need to listen to my body very deeply. And I thought I was already doing that. This is the thing. I had many people say, well, why you? You're really into wellness. I said, the question isn't why. The question is how I'm going to deal with this. Okay? because I don't believe in this kind of philosophy. Oh, well, you brought it upon yourself because you didn't think the right things or you didn't have the right emotions. That is very punitive. I don't subscribe to that model at all. I did know, however, my emotions were somewhat um, important in understanding this illness, that I needed to change the pace of which I lived life. I altered. I needed to dial down some of the expectations that I had on my own need to move through life. It was incredible how much it was a teacher. And that's why I say, now if I see a client, I'd say, please do the Enneagram first. We'll get there quicker. And because you will see yourself. And if you don't see yourself, we'll do it again. Because this is incredible knowledge. And then I can apply that to my coaching space. And it's just deeper knowledge. And you can read it and it's there for life. Okay? So,
It's well, so yeah, it means the self-awareness, self-knowledge, uh, uh, self-knowledge.
and so that's my first tenet. Get to know who you are.
Yeah.
You're an incredible human being with vast potential. Everybody is on this planet. We're all born with that. I really believe that. I think every single soul is born with enormous potential. But we need to get to understand our software. How are we? Who are we? How do we move? What skills do we need to acquire? And be that person. And the Enneagram for me reflected back, but it also reflected back the things that I was avoiding, Riley. Okay. And the things I was avoiding were now coming up. It's like they're coming up and now you need to actually face it. So that was very, very humbling as well as healing.
Have you ever heard of David Goggins?
Yes. Yeah, I know him. Yes, I've read his book. I think he's an
Oh, yeah.
incredible individual, by the way, and an incredible athlete.
I bring him up because, and I actually haven't even read his book yet, but I've heard his story multiple times. And for people who don't know him, he's probably viewed as kind of harsh or rough around the edges,
Yeah.
insane athlete who does insane thing. He's former, I think all three branches of the military, but former Navy SEAL.
He's Navy SEAL. Yeah.
And I bring him up because I think there are probably a lot of people that prescribe to that very, just push, go get him kind of attitude. And what's interesting to me is that when you actually listen to that man speak, I think my interpretation, at least, is that a lot of what he describes as giving him the ability to push past his limits and achieve these incredible, athletic feats, running 200 miles straight. Those kinds of
It's
things.
incredible what he does.
I think a lot of it comes down to actually the same thing we're talking about, which is what is it within ourselves or in our sphere of influence, our circumstances that we are avoiding, and then just those things. Yeah, it's really, it sounds really simplistic, but
I'm so pleased you brought him up because he's such an honest individual. He's so honest. He has that self-knowledge and he's leaning into it. And he does push himself and he knows why he's pushing himself. So it's not just done with a automatic, I have to push through this. He knows something is pushing him. And he's pushed through many illnesses too. And I think that in my life, I needed to stop pushing. That was my lesson. It's like you need to accept and be still.
I think
that was very hard for me I can tell you. It's very hard. But I needed that to know that.
It's so important. And and for people listening to, I really want to stress that I don't want to use the word non-judgment, but it's the snap decision. I think it can be virtue signaling is the right phrase, but I think it's much easier to see online and on social media. People say, I'm an overachiever. I'm a perfectionist. My greatest weakness is I work too. It's that
humble
kind
bragging, we call it.
Yes, yeah, humble bragging. And they say, I just need to take a step back. And I think for many people, yourself included, it really is making sure that you do take that step back, and it comes from that self-honesty space.
And
Your video cut out for a second. I
yeah,
want to make
yes,
sure
it
you're still
did.
there.
And that's where I start, because we don't know, and this is the mystery, why we're made up like that we're made up. But we do need to get to know who we are. And I'm going from the premise that every single soul, because I say human beings are souls, are born with unique fingerprint. They have unique skills and potential. And that all, and for me, everybody's born equal. You know, whether they use those skills, it depends on their life path. However, getting to know this is my flavor of me. You know, I'm very like, I'm thinking I've got two boys and they're incredibly different boys. One is very, very disciplined. One is just an total creative. Things happen for both of them, but in different ways. I've done this test on both of them and I wasn't surprised by the results at all.
It sounds like a very powerful tool.
I
Yeah.
think if I just think, oh my God, that's me.
Yeah.
That's me. It doesn't mean it's that you're not put in a box. That's the most important thing. I don't put people in boxes, Riley. I don't like being put in boxes, you know, given I'm a freedom person. And I think we are all really beautiful souls. It's just that sometimes we don't see that. And sometimes we don't see where our light really shines. I've got to know that. And I can say that now. I didn't know where my light shone. I just thought, well, if I push, I'll get there. I went, I need to push less, actually. That was my lesson. And with my sons, and I think they will look at that. And every single person I've, you know, worked with this system and the tools I have and their own self-discovery, you know, I say, you're on your own ship. There's loads of ships around you that some of them are going your direction, some of them not. We need to connect. Connection is very, very important. But self-knowledge is, who am I first?
We talked earlier about I'm losing my train of thought here
It's okay.
again because we covered a lot of ground.
We have, and I knew we would.
Yeah. Um, we talked earlier about knowing yourself. You talked a lot about the self knowledge, and I think what's really shining through for me is the being honest with yourself. And so when we talked earlier about the feelings versus facts, um, the feeling, I think the feeling that is a constant in this conversation that seems really important to highlight is is understanding, expecting, and accepting the feeling of discomfort and the feeling of um, the using the emotions or the feelings as information. There's a lot of different ways to kind of carve this up, but it's the idea that I'm hearing from you is this using that as feedback and not avoiding it, but confronting it. And it sounds like having that, and maybe there's a better word than discomfort, but it seems like having that feeling is an important part of growth in any domain, in any direction. Just like if you are exercising, there might be discomfort. There should be at times. And yet that's an important part of
Yeah.
improving your endurance or your strength or whatever.
So as a 7 who loves freedom and possibility and doesn't like pain, can you imagine? Okay, of saying, well, I'm getting it all now. And that was probably just an awakening. It was an awakening. I think I've had many awakenings in my life, but that was an awakening at, we're always going to find ourselves. Even what we avoid is going to come back eventually. And when I talk to people at work, you know, in through my work, or it's, let's start with the pillar of this. Let's build out the goal, whatever it is, but on the basis of your own self-knowledge. And does this speak to you? Do you already know this? That's great. So it's just an affirmation. Or is this somewhat new to you? Let's look at all the wonderful things first. And are we using them correctly? Or are you really seeing all this stuff in your gift? And let's have a look at some of the stuff that are being avoided. Are you ready? That's another. Readiness is very important, Riley. Readiness of, sometimes you're pushed into readiness, like I was. I couldn't avoid it anymore. I'd been very successful in avoiding something, but eventually it caught up with me. And what was interesting is I had to go through that because I remember people saying, but you've always been so healthy. And, when I was 60, um, I did a run with someone and went, oh my God, you can keep up with me. And I was very proud of that. But when I couldn't, I thought, well, who am I now? I
Identity.
put a lot of my identity into that, being that kind of person. I couldn't do that anymore.
Yeah.
I had to really sit with some of the information. So that's why, from my own experience, and I will never say I think I know it all. Whereas that thing you just said, you mentioned it before the book.
Curse of
But I
knowledge.
think it caught me completely unaware.
Yeah.
It was like black swan moment. I did not expect this to happen. Yet, it was also one of my greatest, it was like a leverage to my transformation that I needed to do.
Credit to you for being open-minded to receiving that knowledge and
Thank you.
going through that transformation. And I know we're at time here, so I'd like to close out because we covered a lot of ground, but for two final questions for you, well, maybe a third, but it's more of a state. So number one, I would say is in terms of the business context, because we could probably, I feel like we could have a whole half day to talk about all the things that go into business, but if there was a key takeaway for let's say someone in the service-based industry, a coach, a consultant, a trainer, if they were listening to this and you were to highlight one thing that's most important on the business side of the conversation, they're trying to get their business started, or they're trying to grow it, or what would you say that thing is that they should be prioritizing or looking further into?
Value. And if I could add, work on the process. Understand your value and the value you offer.
Yes.
Understand why it's valuable and who would find it valuable. That might be a bit of a suck it and see. You don't know, but know that value.
Yeah.
Not everybody might want that value. Okay? Don't get too dejected by that. But if it's a value to you, it will be value to a lot of other people. And there's a process of finding out where's your direction. And
Yes.
let's remain agile to that path. And if someone said, well, I've got a 5-step plan, you better follow this. It might work, but it might be just one or two of those steps work, not all of them.
Yeah. Love that you said that. And shameless plug, that is something
Yeah.
that we help people with.
Yeah.
So I'll mention that. And gosh, it's so important. So I'm glad you said that one. In terms of change, this is Change Champions, and you are 100% a champion. I want to ask,
Thank you.
rapid fire off the top of your
Yeah.
head. Is there anything as a result of this conversation that you think you will change?
I'm going to reflect on that. I think I'm going to stay on the path, which is of being agile in the moment. That's my word for this year, really. Just be here.
Agile. Yeah.
Agile. I may change. It's coming to me in this moment, which is let this just breathe. Because I'm quite a structured person. And I had all my notes before we're going to record about what I was going to talk about. Just let that go. Let the whole thing breathe. It will go the way it goes. And just trust it. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you. For people who, again, are listening and maybe they forgot your intro, or
Yeah.
they came into the middle an episode, a clip was playing. If they just want to find out more about you, if they want to get in touch, where are the best places to do that?
I'm going to say go to LinkedIn, because I'm really alive on LinkedIn. I've got a website and all that and Instagram, but I'm alive on LinkedIn. So you can find me, Catherine Dixon, LinkedIn. Put in my company name, Empower Your Life, and I'll come up. But just connect me with me there. I make it a thing. Anybody who connects with me, I connect back. Absolutely. Because you've taken your time out to just reach out. And by the way, I'm not looking, you might not want any coaching, but you'll find me there, and we can have a relationship and take the conversation there.
And you are definitely a person worth having a relationship with. It's been an amazing conversation. So thank you for taking the time out of your day and connecting. And I know we'll connect more offline as well. So happy to have come across you and
Thank you for
everything
your
you're doing.
presence, Riley, and thank you for your generosity. And I know you're adding enormous value to people to do what they do so they can help people, because that's what they're doing this business for. People don't go into coaching just to make money. They're going because they want to make a difference. I need to really stress that. There are many of them who are making lots of money and they're doing really well. But most coaches, therapists, healers I know do it because they want to make a difference. They lead with their heart, and they are compelled to do this. So, yeah. And
Yeah,
find the one that you resonate with. And then that's the other thing I would say.
helping helping people. I think you can
Yeah.
boil almost any business down to, but you're definitely leading the charge on that. So thanks
Thank
for
you
all
so
that you do,
much.
Cathy.
Okay.
Thanks so much.